Here's Jeff Paterson, the host of Rink Wide Vancouver, our Canucks reporter after a busy weekend. Jeff, just going to start there. Your overarching thoughts on everything we saw and heard this weekend with JT Miller and the Canucks.
Oh, he wanted to start with Miller because obviously we could start at the end of the hockey game as well.
Yeah.
But look, for all the people that keep thinking that this is a figment of media imagination, this is all really real. When you get that close to telling a player that you're sitting them to protect the asset when it sounds like you've got a deal on the table and then for whatever reason it falls through, they're that close. Like the player probably isn't going to play for the Vancouver Canucks a whole lot longer. And I do think people now, like before, a lot of it was speculation and rumor, but you're getting it from both sides here out of New York and out of Vancouver that they were that close. The players were sitting out in the Rangers farm system, all that kind of stuff. Like, you can connect dots here. This is all pretty damn real. So let's see where it goes from here. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to prepare yourself that the JT Miller era with the Vancouver Canucks is quickly coming to an end.
Is a deal centered around Lafreniere acceptable as you see it? He's not a center. He's a winger. What do you think there?
Well, I just think we're getting to this point now where the Canucks realize that they have to do something. And again, they know how extreme it is behind closed doors and in that locker room. I just feel like it's going to be addition by subtraction, and they're grasping at the best deal possible. They're certainly not working from a position of strength. And Miller holds the cards here. Like, he's got the full no move clause. So it's not like they can cast this wide net. And that's why I think that they were really drilling down with the New York Rangers to get something done here. So you got to get a showpiece back in return. And it may not be the one you were looking for originally. It may not be one that meets all of your needs. You have to remember, though, too, the return they got for Bo Horvat, they quickly flipped that and changed the nature of the return. So I think there is always something behind door number two. But right now, it kind of feels like they're working hard, working long hours here, trying to push a Miller deal across the finish line. At that point, we can all assess the return they got, but whatever they get, it may not be ultimately what they trot out on the ice here over the long haul.
As I mentioned in the opening block, one of the things that I heard is Philip Hedl and a first-round pick. How does that strike you?
Yeah, I mean, it's underwhelming, but again, they're the ones that feel the need to make this move, and so we saw it in the Horvat deal too, that the Islanders were one of the few teams that was prepared to offer up a first-rounder. The rest of the package didn't really matter to the Canucks because they had this design on moving the first-rounder to address an area of need. Now, it's a lot slimmer playing field here because of the no movement clause for Miller. It's not like they can deal and shop a deal around and try and get the best possible deal from a bunch of teams. So yeah, I mean, I'm underwhelmed when you lay it out that way, but I kind of feel that that's where we are, and it feels like the Canucks have reached the point where they recognize that for their own reasons, and we may never know, but the situation is untenable. It's beyond repair in that locker room, and this idea of just patching things up and playing like you did on Saturday night. And look, credit to JT Miller with all the noise swirling. Played a hell of a game. They win the hockey game. I think nights like that, more than reinforcing what could be here for Vancouver, should reinforce to the acquiring team that, yeah, this guy's still got it. And, we know the kind of season the Rangers have had. They need a shakeup too. They're familiar with the player, and they've got designs still in that Eastern Conference of getting to the playoffs. And we saw last year that JT can be, when he's fully healthy and engaged, he could be a hell of a playoff player. So let's see where it goes. It kind of feels like we're still in a minute-by-minute mode when it comes to the JT Miller file.
Why do you think both of the players looked engaged on Saturday? Like, you need two catastrophic losses in a row before both of them seem engaged again. But both Miller and Pettersson, I think, showed some giddy up.
Yeah, less so on Paterson's front, although there was the shift in the third period where he took the body. But again, he's getting paid $12 million if we're going to handpick one shift and think, hey, it just tells you where the bar is for him. But for JT Miller, I think a lot of factors, if he knows that this was his final game, would want to, I think, go out on a high. There has to have been some professional pride kick in after the way they got their asses handed to them by both the Jets and the Kings. So I do think you saw a much better team performance. Rick Tocchet talked about it afterwards. Just they got to their game, in his words, a whole lot quicker than they had in a lot of games this season. And they did play well. I mean, they held the Oilers to 15 shots on goal, 8 over the final 40 minutes when the Oilers were trailing in that hockey game, and we had seen them post remarkable comebacks earlier in the week. So credit to the Canucks for the way they played. And I think there was probably some truth in what JT said, that it helped that it was the Oilers. He knew that if he was playing, he was getting the McDavid matchup. You better damn well be focused if you're going to come out on top there. And so I thought that was pretty revealing post-game, where he basically said, yeah, I mean, it did help that it wasn't the Sabres or another team, that he knew that he had to be laser-focused and locked in, and certainly he was. And it was a signature vintage JT Miller performance. And it's just unfortunate that we haven't seen enough of those this season, or maybe the landscape would be entirely different in this marketplace.
What are the chances that he was sick for Dyson Ice? I mean, it's going around. We know there was a bug at the last game, at the Oiler game, that hit a bunch of media members. But the fact that it was basically just him and coach that didn't show up, I mean, it raises an eyebrow, doesn't it?
1,000%, just like splitting the two of them on the power play there. Nothing to see here, apparently, except that there was everything to see. Yeah. So, yes, there have been so many clues along the way. I will say a reminder to avoid salad at all costs, because it sounds like it was the salad in the press box meal on Thursday against the Kings. Our friend Patrick Johnson's done exhaustive research on this front, and he was one of the victims. Apparently had a sleepless night and some food poisoning. I ate the media meal, but I skipped the salad, as I do too often. But
a good Al Michaels tip.
It worked in my favor. Yes,
the green.
Yes, yeah. Apparently, there was some food poisoning that not just the media, and some would maybe raise a side eye to food poisoning in the media meal, but that's for another day. But apparently there were some players, and even Rick Tocchet said Saturday morning, he said that he had some game time decisions, that there were some guys dealing with something, and I don't think he meant injury front, that I think there were a few guys that may have, they had the flu a little while ago, but I think this was different, whatever. Yeah. Yes, raised eyebrows for sure in the wake of everything that had happened 24 hours earlier. That there was no JT, but no head coach either at Dyson Ice.
I don't blame him for a single solitary second. You were on the verge were on the verge of scratching me to send me to the Rangers. No, I'm not attending your show pony fundraiser. I don't blame him for a single solitary second on that one. So what do you think? You think that win spurs something on? No. Jeff, did you see it? No? No?
I wrote about this at Canucks Army.
Quick no.
Look, at the risk of sounding like the younger George Bush, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, and shame on me. I think I got that one right.
You did.
Won't get fooled again, I believe was.
Look, I mean, the Leafs game last Saturday was supposed to be a turning point in a building block. How did that work? The shutout of the Stanley Cup champs just before Christmas, and then they got blitzed by Boston the next game. Followed that up with a good win over Colorado, and then squandered a 2-0 lead in Utah and lost in overtime there. Go all the way back to November when they beat the Kings to finish up the sweep of the 3-game California road trip. And at that point, that was probably their best effort. They came home and got absolutely bombed by the Edmonton Oilers. So this group is just way too inconsistent now to say, oh yeah, good win. Look, it has the potential to be something to build on, but I need to see it. And again, this is a team that hasn't strung consecutive wins together since the start of December and hasn't won back-to-back games on home ice all year. But man, they're in a position. The Sabres are playing in Seattle, so they're getting the Sabres on the back end of back-to-backs, although it's an early start here on Martin Luther King Day in the States, so it's a sort of a day-night back-to-back. So the Sabres will be a little more rested, but still, you're getting a bad Buffalo team coming in on the back end of back-to-backs. They may see James Reimer in goal here on Tuesday night. Opportunity knocking. So let's see what they do with it, but they have not earned the benefit of the doubt based on other decent performances that have been followed up by something far less impressive.
The people that are podcasting this and listening to this later will know the answer, most likely. But probably best for the NHL if both Myers and McDavid don't play on the rematch, right? I mean, wouldn't it be? I mean, obviously that benefits the Canucks. So I'm not saying that as a homer. I'm saying that it could devolve if they are allowed to get back at it so soon after the incident at the end of the game there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like everybody. I'm really curious to see how the league handles this. The McDavid cross-check is born out of frustration, obviously. Gets tangled up with Garland, and they're losing the hockey game. He's a competitor. There's no place in the game for stick work like that. The Myers one, I have zero idea. Like, away from the scrum, to see two pretty similar-looking, headshots with sticks in the same melee.
Seconds, yeah.
Bizarre, but where I think McDavid at least can play the league like, I was pissed, and, I was frustrated. I don't know what Myers' defense is over there on the sideboards. Like, he and Bouchard battle for a puck. I think they kind of whack at each other, and then Myers lowers the boom. So I'd like to think the league would take into account that they're pretty similar looking and that they would be matching, but we're talking about the best player in the National Hockey League who got away with one in Minnesota earlier in the week. I mean, you can't just keep handing them get out of jail free cards. And not that I needed a reminder that sports is tribal, but my goodness, just the reaction online. Like, there isn't a single person out there that can give you any sort of unbiased opinion on the way things shook down on Saturday night. Like, it's just wild. Like, I've watched the replay literally. I spent Sunday morning, I probably watched it 50 times, sort of breaking down the film and how it all happened. And this idea that McDavid is a complete innocent bystander is hilarious to me. But my timeline just filled. I think every single Oiler fan came at me over the weekend, and that's fine. I used the block button, sort of like McDavid used his stick on Garland. But it's wild. Like, it really is. There's a set of events there, but the way it's interpreted is it's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what this show does, is try and look at it down the middle of the road. One game for McDavid, two for Myers. Does that make sense?
I could see that. I think there's
with the
more
distinction,
of a
as you say, away from the play. And
so we'll see where it goes, obviously. But, I mean, there's a part of me that says, hey, give them each one and let them play on Thursday.
Yeah.
And what happens, happens. And if you're looking for a place to watch Thursday's rematch, well, Greta Bar and the Canucks Army Watch Party.
Very good, J-Pat.
Got to sell
I
these
was
things,
going to get there as well.
But it certainly, it adds some spice to the rematch. Connor Garland's going to hear, that's great. I think he's the kind of guy that'll feed off that. But obviously, the Oilers fans are going to be all over him. Will the Oilers be all over him? We shall see. One of the things that I just didn't get in all of this was the way it unfolded. So it's incidental contact out high. McDavid tries to cut back on Garland. They both fall. Like, Garland is actually at the bottom of the pile as McDavid sort of topples on him. Then they're wrestling. And this idea that it was completely one-sided. Now, is Garland doing his best to hold McDavid down? He said afterwards, he said he's the best player in the league. Might have been the best way for us to get a victory. Ultimately, that's how it played out for the Vancouver Canucks. So Oiler fans may not like that. But for 5 seconds at the very least, it just looks like two guys that are wrestling on the ice. What if the refs had stopped play and given them both minor penalties? Again, I think the Oilers and their fans would have been just livid that Connor McDavid now was gone for 15 with the final 15 seconds. I just don't think there was an outcome that was going to work for the Oilers in any of this. But this idea that McDavid doesn't take a shot at Garland at the, a gloved punch,
Also, they have possession. They have possession. So if they both play down, then it's down to a face-off. Then if the face-off is won by the Canucks, Oiler fans are going to hate that too.
Sure, and JT was dominant in the face-off circle. If we're just kind of trying to figure out the way it might have gone, that yes, it wasn't a guarantee that if they get a power play for the final 7 or 8 seconds, JT was incredible in the face-off circle. That was another area that he really was on his game on Saturday. So, so many angles to all of this, but again, the idea that the Almighty was an innocent bystander, I find quite laughable.
It's a heads-up play by Garland because it takes McDavid out of the play. It dares them to call a penalty. And, of course, you have to get possession for them to call a penalty, so the clock might just expire anyways. And even if there is a penalty called, it's an abbreviated power play where I think the higher danger is allowing McDavid to roam in that situation.
Well, the
It's a
ref
really
can blow it
heads-up
down.
play.
Ref can blow it down if he sees fit. But again, I don't know that it necessarily is advantageous to the Oilers who have possession of the puck. There,
I do think that's like as they split and Garland tackles him again. Like there is a penalty in there somewhere, but by then there's 6 or 7 seconds left in the hockey game, and I just
No, it's not by the rule book, but it's an effective play when defending the 6-on-5, especially against that team. Full disclosure, we're recording this before Alvin speaks today. What do you want to hear from the GM, Jeff?
Why he has not acted yet to help this hockey club that has needed help. And we knew from the time it broke training camp that with Quinn Hughes, and we didn't even know that Quinn was going to take his game to another level then, and a healthy Filip Hronek, that this defense just wasn't good enough. And we've seen that play out for 45 games now, and management has clearly watched as well. The results speak for themselves. Canucks again below the playoff bar, even after the win against the Oilers. So that is certainly a question that I will pose if nobody else does. I mean, there's going to be questions, obviously, about JT and this whole situation and kind of the direction of the hockey club. And remember, this is a general manager that, like, he was flat out pissed off when he met the media after losing Game 7 in the second round last year. Like, bang the podium, and this isn't good enough. Well, how does he feel 45 games in when he looks up and there are 8 teams ahead of him? This is his hockey club. And yes, there were some issues in the first half, but they're healthy now. And even that didn't help them last week. I mean, better effort, obviously, against the Oilers. But, there's a lot to get into with Patrick Allvin, but certainly one of the questions is just his inactivity for a guy that looked and was so aggressive on the trade front a year ago and has been hard to find around the rink, in trade talks, all of that kind of stuff. We just haven't seen much in the way of activity from the Canucks front office.
Last week you said to us, boy, Boeser would be the just easiest to move. From your lips to Boeser's. He says to IMAC, I'm a UFA at the end of the year, so they could look at me and be like, hey, he's the easy guy to trade right now. Your thoughts about Boeser musing about a new destination by March?
Yeah, I saw he talked both to IMAC and to Patrick Johnson, separate articles, separate interviews. In fact, I saw the two of them. IMAC was waiting patiently as PJ had his appointment in Boeser's stall last week. This isn't a revelation. An unrestricted free agent that this general manager has questioned in the past, and I don't get the sense that you get to past the middle of January and there really hasn't been much on the discussion front in terms of an extension. I think a lot of people can see where this is probably headed, and it's just a question, do they pull the trigger on a trade and try to get something for Boeser, or do you ride it out and hope that he has another playoff like he did last year and thank him for his services and take the cap space that you would be committing? And that's sort of the prize in all of this from a Canucks standpoint. Sure, you'd love a return on an asset, but I'm not convinced. I think we may see that this, Boeser stays through the trade deadline. Maybe they double back after the season and give it one last shot, but I think the Canucks have drawn a pretty firm line in the sand in terms of the dollar amount and the term that they're willing to give him. And as a 28-year-old unrestricted free agent with a 40-goal season on his resume, he's going to get paid, and he should. Like, you work to these opportunities. If it's not here, he's going to get his money somewhere. But I do think that there is a significant risk involved for the Vancouver Canucks in locking this player up to, certainly the max kind of contract, and I don't even know if that's on the table from the Canucks' perspective right now. So Boeser, I do think he loves it here in Vancouver. It's the only place he's known as a professional hockey player. Talked to PJ about taking his dogs for walks out in Pacific Spirit Park and clearing his mind and all those types of things. Like, he is a Vancouver right now, but is he going to take a 6-year contract at $6.5 million when somebody might be able to go 7 by 7.5 or 8? Like, it's a business ultimately, and he has to do what's best for him. So Let's see where it goes.
If they're in the same? Do you think if they're in the same spot at the deadline, they still don't trade him? Like if they're 1 point back, sort of exactly where they are now, do you think they still don't trade him?
If they don't make headway here over the next month, and I know the season's interrupted by Four Nations, but no, if they're still below the playoff bar, at that point, maybe you do pull the trigger. A team is out there looking for an accomplished winger to, as a rental, and then you could plug a Jonathan Lekkerimäki in, or maybe get something in return that, get a warm body that could play down the stretch. You're not going to replace Brock Boeser, obviously, but he's not scoring at the 40-goal rate that he was a year ago. So maybe you do give Lekkerimäki a little bit more run at that point. We'll see where it goes. But yes, if they're still below the playoff bar, if they haven't made up the necessary ground over the next month, then that probably does change the calculus a little bit.
I think he may pivot on the Miller deal, gents. That if they get NHL return there
and get a bump,
get a bump, you keep them. If not, and particularly if there's any kind of futures involved in the Miller package, which I think we have to consider now, then I could see Boeser moving on. Lastly, Jeff, tomorrow with their expansion cousin Sabres in the house, they will name the Canucks all-quarter century team for the 21st century. The NHL is doing this around the different franchises. The Sedins and Naslund, do we have any quarrel there? Is anybody fetching to put Kessler or Miller or Paterson or anyone amongst the three forwards?
Is this a fan-driven thing, or who's selecting I don't even know who's ultimately in charge of selecting these teams. So
unclear to me.
I always have trouble.
No, I believe it's the league. The league is putting out two lineups. It's not fan voted.
Like Gary and Bill Daly, or like who? I mean, who's doing the heavy lifting here?
I don't know.
So no, I mean, I think yes, up front those would be the guys. Quinn is obviously one of the defensemen, and then probably Alex Edler. I would think it's Edler's the other guy.
Okay, and then we're Roberto in goal.
I think it has to be, doesn't it? Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there was some who might want to make a case for Noland or a BX or someone over Edler, but
it's got to be
for me. It's career points, career everything. Alex Edler, marvelous stuff, sir. Thank you for this. We'll catch up later in the week. In fact, you'll be sitting in for Blake on Friday, co-hosting with me.
Yeah, and let's see what this roster looks like. Let's see what this team looks like by the time Friday rolls around. I think we're all kind of in standby mode, minute by minute, right now.